All right, Krystal, what's on your radar?
Well, rewind, if you will, to the early days of the pandemic. People were scared and they were dying. Trump was screwing everything up. And across the land, liberals were desperate for someone into whom they could channel all of their early quarantine emotions. The media would give them just such a hero. His name was Andrew Cuomo. The undisputed king, though, of thirsty Democrats, without a doubt, is Andrew Cuomo. An entire nation of desperate libs and media figures is throwing themselves at the New York governor in an embarrassing way. His press briefings send lusty journalists into paroxysms of joy and moaning relief. A CNN op-ed proclaimed, "Thank God for Andrew Cuomo." Marie Claire went with, "My boyfriend Andrew Cuomo's new girlfriend is America. Trapped in my apartment, nowhere else to focus my hormones, the governor is the only man speaking directly to me for miles around." Yes, it was the era of the Cuomosexual, and pleas for Cuomo to govern me, daddy. Of course, we've trashed CNN for their embarrassing coverage, but the truth is almost every outlet was completely complicit. Here's a look at some of Vogue magazine's Cuomo coverage. Chelsea Handler wrote him a love letter. There was a piece explaining why we are crushing on Andrew Cuomo right now. Anyway, I'll spare you the rest lest we all become ill. And of course, all the while that he was doing softball interviews with his brother and winning an Emmy for his press conferences and landing a big book deal on his incredible leadership, people were dying needlessly from his corrupt decision-making on nursing homes. Lawmakers like Ron Kim tried everything they could to get attention to no avail.
You have no idea. It just felt so demoralizing at times. And I felt like I was living in an alternative reality for a couple of months because I saw the truth of what's happening. And I felt like no one was listening to what I was saying. I reached a point where we actually took 70 pages of our report, took it to the United Nations and say there is a violation of human rights that had occurred. A crime against humanity has occurred in New York State because no one else seemed to care. And I needed to document what I saw as someone that mattered.
Now, what's a bit ironic is that Cuomo's behavior most closely mirrors the politician who is most despised by the mainstream press, Donald Trump, of course. The bullying, the corruption, the cover-up, the threats, and now the allegations of a pattern of sexual harassment. A 25-year-old aide says he asked her if she'd ever been with older men. Another former aide alleges that he invited her to play strip poker, gave her an unwanted kiss on the lips, and said that he would go out of his way to touch me on my lower back, arms, and legs. Now, Cuomo has denied those allegations, but did apologize for insensitive comments. Since that apology, another woman has come forward to allege inappropriate behavior at a wedding. Now, none of this will shock a single person who has followed New York politics. Not the bullying, not the lying, not the corruption, not the inappropriate behavior, none of it. And yet, because he was a convenient foil for Trump and gave a great presser, the media failed to do its most basic job when it actually could have mattered. They were happy with their substance-free celebrity-style portrait of Cuomo. Why burst the bubble with, reporting and journalism? Cuomo appears now belatedly to be facing some consequences, especially as the fierce AG Letitia James gears up another investigation into his alleged wrongdoing here. But there's some signs the media still wants to cling to their rosy image of him. As Megyn Kelly points out, none of the major news outlets covered the harassment allegations against Cuomo when they first surfaced. But of course, it's not just Andrew Cuomo who's been forced upon us as some celebrity political demigod with little interest in what pushing power into those politicians' hands might actually mean. And it's not just Democrats either. Think about the gross way Paul Ryan was propped up as some visionary genius truth teller and dorky sex symbol. Remember these incredible photos? These were taken as part of a 2011 photo shoot because Paul Ryan was in the running for Time Person of the Year. He, of course, would go on to become Romney's running mate and then Speaker of the House after a Beltway media campaign to paint him as a very smart, very serious person. The result, of course, the horrible corporate tax giveaway that just basically amounted to robbery and high-class grifting when companies use the extra cash to line the pockets of their wealthy shareholders rather than ever invest in their workers or add jobs. Or consider Mayor Pete. We will apparently be cursed with this guy for all eternity thanks to the fact that the media decided to give him a similar boy wonder status. Just compare how many profiles we got of his relationship with Chasten versus actual reporting on his tenure as mayor of South Bend or as a McKinsey ghoul. Our new transportation secretary is now the subject of a forthcoming Amazon documentary. According to Variety, Mayor Pete will take the audience inside Buttigieg's quest to be the first openly gay president in United States history. Mayor Pete will show Buttigieg at home in Indiana with his husband Chasten and go inside the campaign's early days as well as, ready for this, Buttigieg's historic contested victory in the Iowa caucuses. You all remember that incredible victory well, don't you? Or take our new vice president, Kamala Harris. The media loved Kamala from the beginning, raving about her fashion choices, handing her frontrunner status in the primary before a single poll had even been taken. That favorable treatment and a lack of scrutiny into her coziness with banks and tech companies, or her heavy-handed tactics towards ordinary people, that all led to her ascension to the vice presidency. Now she sits as the heir apparent to the Democratic throne, and in the meantime can play her role by doing things like, killing the minimum wage hike and pretending she never really supported monthly recurring pandemic payments. This celebrity lionization has led to people with terribly damaging records being painted as conquering heroes. And whether the public buys the bill of goods or not, the media profile is oftentimes sufficient to land them in positions of real power. Kamala's actually a perfect example there. She actually had to drop out of the Democratic primary before a single vote was cast because the public was so disgusted with her flip-flopping on Medicare for All and her lack of a coherent message outside of her own ambition. But it didn't matter that the public rejected her. She's almost certainly going to end up as the Democratic nominee for president with a 50-50 shot then at the White House, either next cycle or the one after that. That's why these media political love affairs are so disgusting to me. It's not because it's embarrassing when David Chalian talks about Biden's warm embrace. It's because it's really damaging. Rather than cover these politicians, the press prefers to cover for them, turning them into brands and celebrities rather than officials with power, privilege, and connections. And then they're shocked when an actual celebrity like Donald Trump comes in and games the whole thing. And Sagar, we've talked about the celebrity political culture before, but it has never been so clear to me how actually damaging it is. And here you see it really clearly. All of this information was available about Andrew Cuomo and his decision-making on nursing homes and the deaths it was leading to. If you don't believe me, ask Ron Kim. He was out there trying to get the media to pay some kind of attention to it. And all they could do is from softball question, give him an Emmy. Oh, he's so amazing. He's a resistance hero. Rachel Maddow talking about how, we have two presidents. We've got, the evil Donald Trump and the great and wonderful Andrew Cuomo. I'm paraphrasing. That's not exactly what she said. But all the while, they don't do their most basic job when it actually could have made a difference. And now look, now he's on the hot seat. Now his political career is in jeopardy, but it's after the damage has already been done.
There were 1 million people screaming about this back in April. We were talking about it as early as June. We knew that Andrew Cuomo's decision had led to the deaths of thousands of elderly people in the state of New York. Nobody wanted to talk about it. Ron Kim was thinking about having to go to the United Nations.
He went to the UN.
He had to go to the UN in order to try and get somebody to go and look into this because he couldn't get CNN. We'll talk about this later in the show. But now Chris Cuomo comes out and he says, well, he's my brother, so I can't cover it, but CNN will. Plenty fine to propagandize on his brother's behalf whenever we were in the middle of an actually terrible pandemic and when his brother was in the middle of making terrible decisions which led to the deaths of elderly people. But the culture that you set up there is even more important because Paul Ryan is actually really instructive. Paul Ryan is a fringe figure. His ideology was never accepted by a majority of the American people. He was built up as some sort of wonk master god to make it seem as if he and the ideology he represented was ascendant. No GOP voter liked Paul Ryan all that much. He's even today one of the most hated people within the party. And now he's playing around on Wall Street making millions and millions of dollars. But before that, who made him? The media with this fake P90X bullshit. Same thing with
Those
Kamala Harris.
Amazing, though. I can't be mad about
nothing
this.
Against Tony Horton. Tony Horton's a great guy, but not Paul Ryan. But if you go and you look at Kamala Harris, it was the same thing. The media coverage relative to how many votes she actually was going to receive relative to the polls was abysmal. Remember, Deval Patrick got more serious candidate treatment than Andrew Yang did in the primary, and he got like 0.01% or whatever. I don't even know if he made it to Iowa or New Hampshire.
It wasn't
I don't even remember. Yeah, I remember he showed up once to a campaign event in South Carolina, and nobody came, so they canceled the entire event. That's how embarrassing of a guy this is.
Beto was another one.
Yeah, same thing.
Who's a perfect example. But the thing I really realized in writing out this radar was that it actually doesn't matter whether the public buys what the media is selling or not.
It doesn't.
Like, they didn't buy it with Paul Ryan. They didn't buy it with Kamala. They actually did buy it with Andrew Cuomo. But it sort of doesn't matter because they still, just that media portrait alone is enough to convince the other, like, powerful people in this town that this person has something. Yeah. And then they get elevated to positions of power.
It's a closed system.
Even when you literally have a vote and the public is like, we don't want this person, they're like, great, let's make him vice president. Great, let's make him Speaker of the House. Let's put them in a position, even though their policies have been rejected by the American people, to have lots of power and foist those bad policies on people, even though they've already rejected them. So it doesn't even matter that the public doesn't buy Amy Klobuchar or Kamala Harris or Paul Ryan or Beto O'Rourke or whoever. It doesn't even matter because they still just fail upward and get launched into these positions of power, and we're stuck with them forever.
Well, people ask, like, why do you guys cover the media so much? Why do you guys cover the establishment so much? It's because they're not actually answerable to you. So you have to cover it because this is the only critical coverage that they get, because everything is like an intra-circle where, you can fail on the political stage. Kamala was literally memed into the vice presidency. She is one heartbeat away from President of the United States. Think about that. Because Vogue and the New York Times and others fawned over her sneaker choices back in the campaign. That's how powerful these people are in terms of being able to elevate them.
Yeah, and by the way, I actually think that type of coverage, not only does it do a disservice to the public, but it's actually disrespectful of the politicians as well. Like, totally. I'm sure she loved it and others loved it when they get these glossy profiles, etc. But it's not treating you as a serious person to cover your fashion choices versus your policy. I mean, that's what everybody's interest should be in. I think it's disrespectful all the way around. But the thing that outrages me the most, and again, to bring this back to Cuomo, is you see the way that their complete inability to do the very basics of their job, in spite of, and this is what makes it extra inexcusable, is like almost all these media people are in New York. They actually know people who know Cuomo. They know him, but they know his track record. They know his history of corruption. They know his history of bullying. None of that should be a surprise to any of them, but because he was a convenient figure for the moment, they decided to look the other way and create this hero caricature that, again, people really did buy into in his case because he gave the great press conference and people were so desperate for something to hold onto into that period. And the consequences of that failure by the media at that time are absolutely devastating.
They really are.
Sagar, looking forward to your radar. That's next.